Welcome to Change the Narrative. I'm your host, JD Fuller, an African-American licensed psychotherapist, professor, diversity coach, consultant, and author. We talk about the isms. We talk about the phobias, anything that marginalizes and oppresses. Everything we are not and everything we are is because of fear. Through a mental health lens, we'll have difficult conversations with celebrity guests, political activists, and everyone in between. Our mind will tell us whatever we want to believe, but the truth lives in the body, and that's where change occurs. Are you ready to change the narrative? Jasmyn,
Yes.
welcome to the space, my sister. So happy to have you.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
Absolutely. I want to begin with a little background insight on you. So tell us something from your childhood that is the reason why you are who you are today.
I would say being born to a teenage mother, gave me a lot of time and experiences with my grandparents. And I do think that just, in their generation and what they've experienced really rubbed off on me in regards to, what was accessible to them, the way that they were able to live their lives. And it was very much so, it almost lit a fire of like, I'm going to go after everything that they told me was mine. And so I would say
Mhm.
that, yeah, being heavily influenced, and I was raised by my mother as well, but my grandparents were there, and so I think just that taste of their generation and what they went through, planted the seeds, I think, for where I am now.
That's, I hear that sometimes from from kids who grew up with their parents,
Mm.
basically.
Mhm.
And, so you kind of it sounds like you got the best of both worlds in the sense that you saw how your mom had to get things done, but you
Yeah.
also saw the support and guidance of your grandparents, which is wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it was, for me it was, some people grow up and they think like their parents are these just like invincible beings. I got to see that
Right.
human beings were flawed early. And I think though that in a way that was refreshing though. Like it made me okay to kind of make mistakes and okay to kind of try things because I didn't see a perfect adult. I saw an adult that had grit and went through trials. So absolutely, absolutely.
Wow. You bring up an interesting point from a psychological lens, which is what I'm always looking through. The idea that I always tell teenagers that they're raising their parents. They're teaching their parents how to parent them
Yeah.
at a certain point in life. And so you really you did that to the extreme. I mean, you kind of, in growing up with your mom, really had to give her information that she might not have been receptive to until you
Absolutely.
got older. Wow.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it was
Okay.
a lot of trial and error. Now at
Mhm.
this point in our lives, we're very close, best of friends. But absolutely, there were a lot of times where, sometimes I guess I would even call it sometimes resentment would even seep in, right? Because you would kind of compare to other parent child relationships. But now, though, I do feel that everything that I went through when as a child, often I would think, like, why this or why that? But there's been so many times where I'm working with my students where I've truly been there. I've
Yeah.
truly been there. And so
Yeah.
it's just different. And so I'm thankful
Yeah.
for all of it for sure.
You must have an old soul too, in
I hear
ways.
that. I hear that.
Yeah.
I'm never quite sure how to read it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
It's
yeah.
for example, I had older parents. They always thought my parents were my grandparents.
Okay.
And I had some of that resentment of, other people's parents being so much younger
Yeah.
and able to do so much more. But in a lot of ways, it did. It raised me as an old soul,
Yeah.
with a young spirit, which is an odd combination and often
Yeah.
challenging, but it makes sense to me. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which
Absolutely.
means you have some wisdom. You
Y-
have some wisdom that, you didn't even know you had probably when you were growing up,
Yes.
because of what you were exposed to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to get into something you posted.
Okay.
You said, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm gonna see which profile it was. Okay, I don't know. I'm not gonna dig.
Okay.
This is what you offer. You provide resources rooted in wellness, equity, intellectualism, and love. Please explain what that looks like and how these might intersect.
Yeah, so I think the main thing, right? We hear a lot of things about, teaching the whole child and responding to the whole child. And I think there is a matter, I think there's just a priority of like learning the whole child too. And I think when we think about school, and just education in itself, there are so many environments where it's very like controlled and rigid and they compliance, right? And so for me, when I'm thinking about what I want to do and what who I want to connect with, is that we're prioritizing like this idea that wellness is accessible to you even if you are from an environment that is not ideal, and that
Mm.
we we wellness can look a lot of different ways. And so for us, it's wellness for me is really giving them experiences for them to just learn different versions of themselves. When I talk about equity, it's ensuring that I'm responding to you the way you need me to respond to you. So I always say, like, I am 1,000 different Dean Williams for my kids because they don't need the same version. There's different things I have to pull from myself. There's different just experiences I have to pull from when I'm speaking with them. So ensuring that I read in a book, it was one of the questions about equity was, equity is asking, how can I get every student there? And it spoke to me because there is so open. There can be
Mm.
so many different things. And so my job is to figure out what is there for my children, for our students, and then what can we do to kind of get them there. And when I think about intellectualism, I'm thinking about, I don't want a child to just repeat what I've given them. I want them to critically think and pick apart and challenge me and tell me that they don't agree and tell me why and let's debate it, right? Like, I don't want them to just be beings that you tell me, I say it back, and then that's success. And it's not. Like, we don't,
Mm.
I want to build thinkers, people who are able to challenge, um, and be strong in that without being judgmental in it, but being able to say, yeah, hey, I hear you but I disagree, and that's okay.
Mhm.
And then in the aspect of love, just I know that there are children that,
Mhm.
I'm not going to say I think that children don't get love, but I think love looks a lot of ways. And I think that it's our job as educators to show what healthy love is, in a way that, one phrase I say all the time in my building is, we don't do that here. That's a very non-threatening way of, I'm not saying what you see at home is wrong, but I'm saying here
Mm.
there's a different way of doing things. And so just exposing them to healthy love, and what love within friendships, love with it, just showing them exposure is big for me. So I would say all those pieces kind of come together with like giving them the right exposure to opportunities, to challenges, and yeah, and to love.
I love the way you explain that and the way you showed the intersectionality. I think the tricky thing about love, particularly when it comes from when it comes to communities in the global majority, it is judged based from on a Eurocentric lens
Hmm.
and a very westernized perspective of what love looks like,
100%.
and I think that's hugely problematic because obviously it does the opposite of what you're saying. Is it says if you don't do it this way, then it's a problem. And I think people have to be really careful of that, especially
Really.
with new age parenting. I understand this new age parenting. I get it.
Right, 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 right.
I get it.
Yes.
And there's a place for old school as well. 'Cause
Absolutely.
that's what got you here. So
Right, right, right. Absolutely. And you're right. It's like it's so often that people are like, yes, we like different as long as it fits into this box. Like, you can be different within this box. And it's gross. Like, it's problematic. And so just even the language shift of, as opposed to telling someone that that's not right, or that no, that doesn't fit to this community, to the culture that we have here. So that way, you're like you're saying, we're not almost forcing my view. I'm just simply saying the way that we're going to be in harmony here looks like this.
yeah, yeah, I appreciate that. You posted something that said, if you're not in this arena getting your ass kicked, you're not interested in their feedback. Will you break that down?
So I think that there are a lot of people giving their perspective with no experience around what they're putting their 2 cents in. And I just
Mhm.
think that, teachers specifically, when we look at just how many teachers are leaving, and a lot of feedback that I've gotten is that the leadership is just, they don't feel supported, or the support that they do get isn't relevant to what's happening. And so for me, I like to operate in a sense of, like I work alongside you. I tell my team, I'm glad to be in partnership with you. Like, right, we're doing this thing together. And I'm
Mhm.
not just going to watch from the balcony, you getting your butt kicked. Like, I'm literally going to say, can you tap me in? And I'm going to ask that first because support looks very different for everyone. But it's ensuring that they know that I'm here to get my hands dirty just like you. And to be totally honest, my hands are already dirty. So I'm here to just continue and adding them on, you know? So, like, just so they know that my feedback is never coming from a place from like, I gotcha, but it's from a place of, hey, have you considered this? Um, and really rich conversations come from that. Like, hey, can you tell me about what you were doing here? I don't immediately go into what worked for me, or what I've seen elsewhere. Sometimes I just like to simply know, like, why did you choose to make that choice, right? Like, where was your
Mhm.
thought process at? So for me, it's really like I'm never going to be that person that is so gun ho on being a leader that like humanity is lost. I think that we are all working towards a common goal and we're just kind of on different, we have different roles on this team, but same team doing the same thing. And that's the mindset that I like to carry.
Two things came up for me when you're saying that. One is that is collective perspective, which is very much the culture of the global majority. We are a collective group of people. It is about collaboration, and it takes a village kind of
Hmm.
mentality. And also, it sounds like something about your mom being young and your grandparents being older that taught you something about leadership that you didn't learn in a book. That's
Right.
what I hear.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember my grandparents very early. I don't know if this is problematic, but very early they would say things like, "You have to remind yourself that no one owes you anything." And even this that simple, like, I'm not, no one owes me anything. I'm not owed a handout. Sometimes I'm not owed an explanation. Sometimes you know what I mean? I'm not owed that. So I'm not running around seeking for certain things that I know I'm not owed. It's very personal to me. And you're right, that is something that I was told, but then I had to live it, and and they made me live it in ways that
Mm.
I appreciate though. There were times where my childhood didn't look like my friends, and looking back on it now, I'm thankful for that because there are just some moments in which I don't have to react because I know bigger picture what's really happening here, and it just
Okay.
it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I am going to say, however, we are owed reparations. I just want to make
Yeah.
that clear.
Right. Let me get my
We're
grandpa.
not
Yeah.
we're not talking about reparations because we
No,
owe
no, no,
reparations.
no. We're more
That's
more so in the sense of like humble yourself to know that you know.
I know what you're talking about. I just
Yes,
want to make sure that they know what you're talking about.
right. Yes. Please don't confuse that. Please don't confuse that.
Okay, you are an instructional coach, an assistant principal, and an urban educator.
Yeah,
Where does one begin and the other end? Does that make
it does
sense?
make sense. It's a great question, actually. Um, I would say an urban educator doesn't end for me. I think that's truly like a part of my identity. My identity. I think I am a believer, so I do think when I was created, like if visually, I feel like that cup of urban educator was like sprinkled into my makeup. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
fine. I'll never take it off, and I'll always find a way to tap into that arena. Um, but I would say instructional coaching, that's something that I get a lot of joy from now. And it's something that allows the bigger picture of being an urban educator. That's just the avenue that I'm taking to almost like deliver what I'm trying to do. Because I was an urban educator when I was a teacher. I was an urban educator when I was a para. I was an urban educator when I was a tutor, right? So I don't think that's ever going to leave. And I even think, when I'm working with my own daughter, who is not an urban kid at all. Very suburban. um, but with my own child, though, I still take what I've learned and what I've experienced from being an urban educator to educate her and to give her these experiences as well. So I think that I don't know if I can say that the urban educator in me, if it ends, I don't know if I really wanted to. It's like one part of me that I'm like very proud of. It's sacred, and I cherish it because I know that the work is special and the work is avoided, and it's just really, really important to me.
Mhm. So many things come up for me right now. I'm going to try to organize them in my brain where all the tabs are open all the time.
Right.
Uh, you said something that I think I speak to often, and I think I speak to it because it's important, which is you have a suburban kid and you came from an urban background.
Right.
And so oftentimes parents, I'll hear parents say of older kids, my kid just not like me, like doesn't have the same drive, doesn't have this, that, or the other. And that's when I reach back and say, well, how were you raised?
Yeah.
This is why you can't remove everything in terms of the way you are raised, because your child's you don't want to have the same struggle. I get that.
Right.
But there needs to be a struggle. There needs to be an experience. There needs to be a reason to thrive, because this society is not going to make it easy, whether they came from the burbs
Or
or the
not.
hood. You
Exactly.
know?
Exactly. And I think it might have been the book I was reading. They said, can't think of the author's name, but she said there's a fine line between adversity and trauma. And I think
Yeah.
that that is powerful
Said that.
because adversity, my child is going to experience it, is necessary. But like you said, once we cross over to those trauma lanes, then that is what I'm trying to uh, save her from, right? Save is the
Yeah.
wrong word, but keep her away from, I should say.
Mhm.
But you're right. Yeah, I refuse to raise a child who is quote unquote privileged or don't consider other human beings or value other perspectives. Absolutely not. And so that is something that won't go away, even with the environment of the verbs, like you said.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, and again, for them, not for you and me, we don't have privilege, so that's not anything you can ever do, because she's not going to have access just based on the color of her skin.
Yes,
She may have opportunity,
yes.
but
Thank
I
you
don't
for that
I don't want
correction.
to.
Yes,
Yeah, well, I just don't want to homogenize the word privilege,
right.
because that's been done with too many different things that we experience in our population, and
Mm,
I think it needs to be recognized as such. There is an advantage that comes to being born in a certain body versus the other. So
right.
your daughter is going to experience adversity just moving the way she is through the world,
Yes,
and you're going to coach her on how to do that in a way that allows her to integrate both your experience, how you grew up, but also with her reality. And I
yeah,
appreciate that. I think that's
yeah.
great. And she's darn adorable. I can't get enough of those
Thank you
videos.
so much. She's so fun.
Oh my goodness. Um, in oh no, there's something else I wanted to tag on to that.
Mhm.
Let me preface it this way. I'm always thinking while I'm talking, so bear
Yeah,
with me. Um, you know, we have to think through two minds in black and brown bodies, right? We have to think through two minds. So while I'm thrilled about your focus and understanding of being an urban educator, I also am, and kind of like at the same time, a little bit concerned that receivers will think that skill set and your services might not benefit their learners
mm,
because it doesn't resemble an urban environment. And I have some thoughts on that, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on that because I know your services
mhm.
will benefit everyone. So can you speak on that a little bit?
Uh-oh, the network is lagging just a bit.
Okay, that's okay. Did you catch it? Do you want me to go through it again? Because it can be edited. Did I lose you?
There we are. I can hear you speaking clearly.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Do you want me to go through the
Yeah,
questioning?
could
I'll
you
just do
repeat
it
the
again.
question? Okay.
Let's do that again because then it's a clean edit. Um, so, we think through two minds in brown and black bodies. We think through our cultural lens, but also we've been taught by white supremacy to always consider the experience of white bodies and white communities. And so we have to know how to navigate that effectively. And so while I'm thrilled about your focus as an urban educator, I also have a little bit of a concern that some of the receivers will think, oh, that's for a specific environment. Her skill sets for a specific population. Her services might not benefit my learner. And I don't believe that that's true, but I wanted to have you speak on it before I offered my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I would love to hear your perspective. And I don't, I'll just answer it like exactly what's on my mind of that.
Yeah.
While I do truly feel that everyone will be of benefit, prioritizing equity, intellectualism, love, and wellness. But I do feel that my focus and my lens are for predominantly Black and Brown spaces
Hmm.
because I've seen so many educators going about it in the wrong way, with a lot of control and denial of bias. And while I do think that absolutely everybody would benefit from the focus, my personal focus
Mm-hmm.
is on the lower socioeconomic group of students, um, Black inner city students. I do feel that they deserve to be one vocal point. And that's just my perspective. I am curious to hear what you say. But yeah, from my perspective, it's like they that is where that's where I would like to be, because I see a lot of damage being done by both Black and white educators to that group of students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. I think that there's a lot of urban kids going to private schools.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually I'm working in one right now, and I see the urban student in this environment, a white space per se.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that this urban student whose parents have worked extra hard, sacrificed, given up whatever they can because they believe this is the best education for their
Mm-hmm.
child. And their child has to figure out how to navigate this white space with not a lot of support,
Yeah.
because the space wasn't created specifically for them and their experience.
Right.
And so that's where I see your skill set also benefiting other
Mm.
populations that are just not specifically brown and Black spaces, but where brown and Black kids are showing up in
Right.
academic environments.
Yeah, that's actually very powerful. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because you're right that, the goal, quote unquote, is to get to get out of,
Mm-hmm.
these areas. And you're right. You're exactly right. That's interesting. You have my brain going too, of like, that might be another client because
Oh no. Oh no, it is another client.
that is another client.
Let me correct you. That is another client.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I didn't consider, because my experience has been in all Title I schools, that's just kind of where my default brain goes. But
Mhm.
you're absolutely right. Absolutely
That's a
right.
market for you. That's a market for you. Trust me.
Yeah.
Yeah. International schools is a lot of brown and Black kids, and they come from different cultures, different learning styles, and different access.
Yeah.
And some could really benefit from what you provide.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I want to ask you a technical question.
Okay.
What does it mean for a child to be a proficient reader or to have reader proficiency? And then there's a second part to that.
Okay.
What is the main barrier or contributing factor?
So just like textbook speaking, as far as like grades go, a child is proficient if they are able to fluently read, comprehend, and then they have, the vocabulary acquisitional skills that they would need. And there's some
Mhm.
background knowledge that goes into there too. So like all of those all kind of work together for them to be able to read and understand. And I want to add, and enjoy reading. Like you need to be able to have all of those things. And so if a child is quote unquote proficient in regards to what the assessments say, they're able to put
Mhm.
those pieces together and correctly answer a set of questions. Um,
Okay.
we know that there's so much more that goes into mastery and learning. However, our nation is light years behind, and they are determining your ability by a test score. So, in
Mhm.
regards to the, where I work, that is proficient. I may give a different definition personally, but like to your question, that is being proficient, being able to accurately answer questions at 70% accuracy, including all of those skills. And I think that as was listening to a podcast that was mind blowing called "So the Story," and her research found that 65% of fourth graders are not proficient. So one of those things are missing. One or more of those things are missing. And then 80% of Black fourth graders are not proficient. And when we think about like those numbers are just heartbreaking, because
Staggering.
there's something that we can do about it.
Mhm.
It's not stuck there, you know what I mean? That there is a solution. And so when we're thinking about like why that is, or why students are struggling to be proficient, I think it's so layered. I think there's multiple reasons, but the first thing that my brain goes to is that they're being forced to learn one way. And I think that there are so many settings that the teacher teaches, and then the child is supposed to learn it. And if the child doesn't learn it, then something's wrong with them. And until we fix that point of who to put the focus on, if we're only ever going to blame the child, that's why we are at 65 and
Mhm.
80% proficient. I think we have to do a better job as like a nation of moving the accountability, and not just on the teacher. They always like to either it's a teacher or kid.
Yeah.
But redesigning this whole thing of how do we introduce um, new information to them, and how are we allowing them to show mastery as opposed to throwing this test in front of them. When we think about the layer of, or the aspect that the tests are rarely considering those Black and brown students taking it, there's a level of, well, is it really 80%, or is it 80% on the test made by the majority? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
if you and I created the test for a group of students that we had an experience with and that we knew, would that number still be the same? I don't know. So I think it's the way in which we measure proficiency and mastery. It's the way in which we correct students, and it's the curriculums that never consider those students but force them to learn it day after day.
Mm.
That is where I think the issue lies.
And it's a systemic issue that,
100%.
these tests and assessments are created the way that they are. They absolutely are created to not be accessible for the kids who look like us. And it's a conundrum for
It
sure.
is.
Because we have to figure out how to do that in spite of knowing the system is built to not do that.
Right. Right. And it's another thing that it sometimes it breaks my heart, because it's like, again, I do see that, yes, they're not being proficient on these assessments, but there are also moments where I'm literally reading with children and they are not fluent, right? They are not comprehending. And that is when I look at, I want children to know that it's nothing wrong with you. It's just simply that you don't learn the way you've been taught. And if you are a kid that's been at the same elementary school, K-8, you haven't had much variety. And I think it's just so important for teachers to look within and be able to say, like, hey, I'm not reaching this kid. Can we get somebody who may, as opposed to, hey, your child has a learning disability?
Yes, yes, so true. And you spoke to this a little bit, but I wanted to know if you wanted to elaborate at all, which is basically, you said when a student is struggling, it's important that there are many contributing factors that are considered,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Like,
And so,
yeah,
go
we
ahead.
can't just immediately go to, the child can't read, because even that is so open in, like, what part of reading? Like, reading is not just like a thing. Like, there's so,
Yeah.
so many things that go into that. But we had a student. This is actually a good example. We had a student a couple years ago who was put on an IEP, and the year before that, they were homeless. Her and her siblings, and her mother was homeless, and her mother was able to get some resources. The child was on that IEP for that year, but also during that year, the mother was kind of, she got some resources, she got back on her feet, just like really, really, like, she made it kind of through that really hard time that they had. And within that fall, so the next year, so now they're a couple months into this new life. Um, I mean, proficiency flew up. Like, she was
Mhm.
reading, she was engaged, she was joyful. And so that's what I mean by that. A teacher may have labeled that child as incompetent, defiant, and incapable, but no, there was a huge life factor happening that hindered her from being able to reach the potential that was always there. And had we allowed her to just kind of, stay on this IEP and get pushed along, as we see oftentimes, we wouldn't have tapped into that potential. But we stayed on her of like, no, no, the bar is up here for you and you can reach it. Nope, let's try it again. Let's try a different way. And so that's what I mean by, again, slapping an IEP on her is not what did it. The change in environment and her family having a home and consistent food is what did it. And
Yeah.
so that's what I mean by there's just so many layers that go into a child's ability to be success. Well, how we define successful, but
Yeah.
successful.
Well, you bring up something that I feel like I've been really big on the last couple of years, which is, this idea of the mantra is social emotional learning. It seems to be the latest
Yeah.
trend all around that we have to tend to the social emotional learning. And I think that people have a different idea of what that means. And so I'm curious what your how you make sense out of that, because I have my own sense that I make out of it.
Yeah, I think I'm still learning and unlearning and taking in and giving away. Because you're right, it is so all over. And there's ways that it's really cute and fun, but I think there are ways that it
Yeah.
should be really raw and when I'm thinking about social emotional learning, I want them to learn how to, manage their time. What does it look like to plan? What does it look like to disagree? How do you regulate yourself when you are vulnerable or when you are, when it's something there that you really want, but you shouldn't do, right? Like, how do you respond to temptation? What does temptation feel like? How do you know if someone is good for you? I think there's a lot that goes into it. Into this idea of social emotional learning, but I think it's a way of, for me, allowing or the entry level to someone learning who they are, like themselves.
Mm,
And I think the earlier we can allow children to know that they're individual, the better, because they're not forcing themselves to fit in these spaces that they just don't fit in. And so I think
mhm.
social emotional learning is the foundational work of like you as an individual and how you are going to connect with this world. And then there are some
Yeah.
tips in there of healthy communication and what does that look like, and how do you respond when you're upset and things of that. But it's really allowing them to know that, like, me and this body is like this amazing journey that I'm going to go on, and how do I allow myself to be searching for my own happiness and not forcing myself to be the success that my teacher in second grade told me that it was.
Hmm. Hmm. So I agree, and I want to add another
Mhm.
lens to it, which is the mental health lens. When you were talking
Mhm.
about that child, how is a child who has a real stressor and trauma like homelessness expected to learn? Like there needs to be more
Yeah.
of a academic proficiency around the mental health component of social emotional learning. If that child has the burden and the barrier of a mental health stressor, that has to be considered, because how can they
Yeah.
discover themselves if the trauma keeps revisiting them? As it is, they're going to have to learn, black and brown students anyway have to learn about how to integrate racial trauma into their lives and still continue to thrive.
Yeah.
So it's very, very, it's different. It's not the same for everyone. And I understand the idea of discovering who they are individually. And also, I think we can't remove the collective part of the culture, because
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
what's going to nurture. That's what's going to nurture and support them on this journey. I just think that the schools tend to miss the mental health component as a part of that social emotional learning. And I would love to see that better integrated into the reality of what kids are dealing with. Does that make sense?
Yeah. We started to lag just a bit, so I'm hoping I caught the end of that.
Yeah, just I want that to be integrated into the academic environment more, where people are considering, okay, what is all that this child is bringing in to school? They're not just bringing their body and their book bag.
Mhm.
They're bringing other stressors along
Right.
with hormones and developmental issues. There's also real life outside stressors that they're being impacted by, and so that social emotional piece is going to inform their presence in your class and ability to really take in all that you're trying to offer. That's the part that I'd like to
Absolutely.
see.
I agree. I 100% agree, and I think that, again, when we're thinking about like just the way that schooling is structured, I think it's intentionally not prioritized. I think that, um, yeah, they're brushing over it, and it's easier to just say that this kid has behavior issues as opposed to, because that takes a lot of work and that takes a lot of more hands involved and that takes a lot more knowledge and I think that yeah, I think that in a way it's almost intentional. But then another part of me feels that people don't see the value, as you stated. I don't think people really know the layers of struggle.
Mhm.
And you know Another piece that is kind of in my mind right now is some of our families aren't there. And so
Oh,
when I start
absolutely.
talking to them about certain needs, the
Mhm.
pushback and fear that rises, um, that is also a layer of it, of, some family members, when I say things like, he seems very low, these past couple of days, and I haven't really seen him smile a lot and things. And, the response being, oh, I mean, he's all right, or he's too young to have. It's almost like I wish what I would strive for is not only educating and changing the way we operate in schools, but having some type of family support or
Yeah.
club that will allow the families to learn, think, and unlearn really,
Mhm.
about that as well, because they can be very apprehensive when you start talking about that.
Well, and we have to look at the history,
Yeah.
and the concerns about, right, being stigmatized,
Hmm.
just like mental health has been stigmatized in our communities. There needs to be a lot more education around mental health and the fact that how can you live in a society that is constantly pressing on who you are in a way that feels oppressive and not have a mental health component?
Yeah.
That that doesn't seem possible to
Yeah.
me. So to normalize it more, like there's nothing wrong with your child. It's the environment that has created this. So how can we collaborate to support your child and you
Yes.
in this new understanding?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's really it's interesting. Like it's interesting because I truly believe that our families are doing the best that they can. The families that I
They are.
serve, they're doing the best they can. And so sometimes they don't even see how their choices are kind of harming, right?
Yeah.
Their children. But you're right. It is a component that needs to be prioritized. And what I've learned just in this role as an assistant principal, as a dean, that I can my reach is only so far because I'm still
Yeah.
in someone's box. And so in this role, I'm still in someone's box, and so it's me being really really okay with being the only person in the room to kind of say, hey, let's think about this differently.
Yeah.
But I've had to learn to really be okay with that because
Yeah.
it's not always prioritized, especially the higher up that you go.
Yes. No, no, I hear that completely. And you can only do what you can do. I
Hmm.
just think, exposing them
A
to new
hundred
information
percent.
about it is where it begins,
A 100%.
Um, you share a lot of resources on your social media, and off the top of your head, what are 5 books you think would benefit educators?
So, Black Appetite, White Food. It is like I would read it again and again. I just love the way it was written. So, Black Appetite, White Food. Why are all the black kids sitting together in the cafeteria?
I know that one.
Phenomenal. I actually truly think that The Color of Law is one
Mm,
that would benefit, especially when you think about like redlining and like that is relevant. um,
yeah.
it explains a lot when you
Mhm.
really think about the systemic issue. So the color of law, I think, would be a great one. We want to do more than survive. That one is beautiful because even the title is beautiful. Um, and let's see, you said 5. Maybe let me peek behind me. Let me
Go for it.
see. Yeah. Ah, this is a good one too. The Equity and Social Justice Education by Dr. Kafeli. This is another one that, as you can see, it's another one
Yeah.
though that is phenomenal in a sense of like more practical. How do I take this and apply it to a school? But those will be the ones that I would highly suggest, especially for someone who, let's say, and I won't even say non-black because there are some black people who are still getting there themselves there. There are some people who don't really buy in to what to the true harm that is there or to the oppression that still exists every day in classrooms. And I think that the color of law really allows people to see, there's this isn't opinionated, these are facts, this is history.
Mm.
And so you can see the historical thumbprint on
Yeah.
what we're trying to get across. So those would be my 5.
Great, great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Look, before we wrap up, I want to make sure that you put all your social media handles out there along with your website. Would you please do that?
Yes. So, as I was introduced, my name is Jasmyn Williams. You can find me at the Urban EDU on Instagram. That is where I am the most active. I love to connect. I like to be challenged. You've challenged me before, and I appreciated it. I like that. So definitely join in there. And then the website is theurbanedu.com. I'm excited. My website is actually being revamped with some cool things going to where I have some think pieces being added. And so I'm really excited to explore that, putting my thoughts on paper and allowing that to be explored as well. But yes, definitely always open to conversations and thoughts and articles and just different experiences that will allow me to learn, because I am nowhere at the end of this. I'm so at the beginning that it's exciting. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, definitely come along the ride at the Urban EDU.
What about Linktree and LinkedIn?
Oh, yes. Jasmyn Williams, Jasmyn spelled Jasmyn Williams. You can find me on LinkedIn in that way. It could be under Jasmyn Williams, MED, but
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Anything else? Did we get them all?
I
TikTok?
Yes.
Anything
No,
else?
I limit myself with the platforms.
I
But
understand.
sometimes
I
too much
understand.
is also a thing. um,
I
so yes,
understand. I just want to make sure.
yeah, yeah, just Instagram. Just Instagram. And of course my email, you can always email me too, info@theurbanedu.com if you are interested in, just collaboration or things of that.
Perfect. Look, Jasmine, although I am a fairly recent follower, it felt like we vibed immediately, and I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah, same.
Um, yeah, good. Okay. And I like the way you hold educators accountable while making room for what they don't know and being willing to teach them. I think
Yeah,
that's really
thank
important.
you. Yeah.
Um, when you post, I know school's about to be in session for real. So I make sure I get my lesson for the day. um,
Just want to offer another perspective.
no. Class in session, school has opened. We about to hear something, so I try to reshare what you do.
I appreciate it
I
so much.
appreciate you and what you are doing. May you continue to be uplifted, and thank you so much for taking this time to hang out with me today, sis.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Definitely a fan of your work and all that you do. So it's so mutual. It's just it's enjoyable to be able to learn from the people in your community. And the
Yeah.
way that you frame things is very profound, but also very clear. And so I appreciate it. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much for having me.
I love a good mutual appreciation session. So
Yes.
thank you so much. That means a lot
Yes.
to me. Sincerely,
Yes.
that means a lot to me. All right, I'll be in touch. And again, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.